What up, though? The National Archives, the age of mass migration. The period 1815 to 1914 was seen as the great age of mass migration. In the mid 19th century, the Colonial Land and Immigration Commission was created to foster and promote immigration to British colonies and dominions, originally settling Australia as a jail colony in the 1780s. The British sought skilled migrants to develop its vast land and provide services for its growing population. The New Zealand Company was set up in the 19th century, in the 1800s, to colonize New Zealand by encouraging capitalists and skilled laborers from Britain to settle there. Sound familiar? It should. Before the advent of steam, the journeys would take weeks and be very hazardous. Many ships would be shipwrecked en route with cramped conditions, especially in steerage class. Ill health was a problem, with thousands of would-be immigrants dying from diseases such as measles, diphtheria, scarlet fever, typhoid, smallpox, and tuberculosis. Let's go back. It says in the 1830s, okay? That's the last date. And the date of this particular portion is 1841, 1830s. Now they're talking about before the advent of steam. Remember, you were told that your beginning was 1619, and you were told that the soil portion that you sprouted up from's beginning was when Cristobal Columbus landed on our shores. Remember this. 1619, you were told your beginning started that year. It's almost difficult to say because at this point, it's utterly ridiculous. So, 1619, this portion of the article, 1841, it also mentions in the 1830s, much of the rural economies of Britain and Ireland were in decline. And then it says, before the advent of steam, the journeys would take weeks and be very hazardous. Now, these are the journeys they're speaking of. They were just talking about the British colonizing New Zealand. But think about this. You were told that a massive transatlantic slave trade where Africans, people from the soil portion we call Africa, which is properly Afro-Eurasia, where they came from sub-Saharan Africa by the tens of millions, some say 100 millions, on ships, on sailboats across the Atlantic. Perilous journeys that took anywhere from 3 to 4 months, maybe more. Chattel slavery that happened from that very point in 1619 and continued until the early 1800s. But see, this particular portion of this article from the nationalarchives.gov, they mention 1830s and 1841, and they said before the advent of steam, the journeys would take weeks and be very hazardous. Many ships would be shipwrecked en route with cramped conditions, especially in steerage class. It's insane that we still have to talk about these things, but we do. Ill health was a problem with thousands of would-be immigrants. They say thousands. In your beginnings, millions are spoken of. Tens of thousands per year. Ill health was a problem with thousands of would-be immigrants dying from diseases such as measles, diphtheria, scarlet fever, typhoid, smallpox, and tuberculosis. And they're not even saying that they're crammed like the sardine can slave ship that you're used to seeing, that some of you wear on your shirt with pride. It says 1884. It says child immigration schemes to Canada, Australia, and Rhodesia were a feature of Victorian Edwardian Britain, where so many children had been orphaned and abandoned. Does this sound familiar? Child immigration of abandoned or orphaned children. Dr. Barbados was the biggest player in terms of organizing the resettlement of pauper children to Canada. They say pauper children. Over 80,000 would be dispatched there between 1869 and 1930. Over 80,000. And they call them pauper children to make you think a certain kind of way. Remove the pauper and what do you have? Children. What does this mean? Disgust. Demonic is what it means. It didn't just start, but you are fooled to believe that it just started. The majority of children would never be reunited with their families again. Just like today, we're not talking about the children. We just talk about the adults. Over 10 million people immigrated from the UK and Ireland to North America in the 19th and 20th centuries, which means in the 1800s and 1900s. 10 million people immigrated from the UK and Ireland to North America. Shipping companies like the White Star Line made the scale and speed of this possible as steam technology became used to power vessels. Before that, it was elbow grease in order to get a vessel across the water. Well, if you would even call it a vessel. I'm saying within the imaginatory story that's been pounded into your very fabric of who you are, to the point where it's a sense of pride with you now. This sardine can slave ship story. It's a sense of pride with many. And I'm going to jump out on a limb and say that your older family members think you're absolutely insane. Shipping companies like the White Star Line made the scale and speed of this possible as steam technology became used to power vessels. Journey times to America were cut from weeks to days. Okay, let's move on. This is from the Pew Research Center. One in 10 black people living in the U.S. are immigrants. Think about this title. Think about this title. if you are black, right? You, not everybody who also listening. I'm talking to you. If you are black, right? And it says 1 in 10 black people living in the US are immigrants. Which black are you? What kind of black are you? Well, we know that there is a definition of the word black. Somewhere along the line, you stopped caring what that definition was. Actually, I don't know if you ever knew what the definition was. I've spoke on it at length. It's Do I want to keep speaking on it? Well, doesn't really matter if I want to or not. I have to clear it up every time I see it. Think about this statement. Think about this title. 1 in 10 black people living in the U.S. are immigrants. What does that say about you as a black? Who are you? Immigrants, particularly those from African nations, are a growing share of the U.S. black population. So from this, we can see that certain people from African nations are being lumped in with you as a black, as the kind of black that you are. The fact that I'm speaking about this makes me think that I'm insane. The way I see people, this actually diminishes the way I see people. Do you think that our 8 great grandparents or our 16 great grandparents or 32 third great grandparents were having conversations about what kind of black they are? By Christine Tamir and Monica Anderson. The analysis presented in this report about the foreign-born black population of the United States combines the latest data available from multiple data sources. The analysis presented in this report about the foreign-born black population. What if everyone called themselves what their people called them? This entire research paper wouldn't exist because you couldn't just lazily call someone black. But it's like fiat currency. Everyone gives it value and therefore it is valuable. For census years 1980 and 1990, black immigrants, I'm telling you, if you stop calling yourself black, if everyone start calling themselves what their people called them or what their people are and what their people were and are, there would be no purpose for research papers like this. This illusion becomes big business at your expense. It's no one else's fault. For census years 1980 and 1990, black immigrants and foreign-born black population refers to persons born outside the U.S., Puerto Rico, or other U.S. territories whose sole self-identified race is black, regardless of Hispanic origin. U.S. black population and black population refers to all people who self-identify as black in the United States. See? It's no one else's fault. It's your fault. You identify as black. Identify as. This includes those who say their race is only black. Some people say their race is only black. I'm not going into the definition of black. You can look at one of my other shows for that. I've covered this ad nauseum. Again, in a minute, me and everyone listening to me, it's like we gonna start a mob called, it's already a mob called Insane. This includes those who say their race is only black, those who say black is one of two or more races in their background, and those who say their race is black or that one of their races is black, but also indicate they are of Hispanic or Latino or black origin. The terms black population and black people are used interchangeably in this report. The terms black population and black people are used interchangeably in this report. The terms black immigrants, the black immigrant population, black migrants, and the foreign-born black population are used interchangeably throughout the report and refer to persons who were both born outside the United States, Puerto Rico, or other U.S. territories to parents neither of whom was a U.S. citizen and who identify their race as black. Yeah, get your vomit bucket. I know if I say black one more time, somebody gonna vomit. This is inclusive of those who say black is one of two or more races in their background, regardless of Hispanic origin, in U.S. Census Bureau surveys from 2000 and later. Don't it sound crazy? Don't it sound crazy when you hear parents neither of whom was a U.S. citizen and who identify their race as black? This is inclusive of those who say black is one of two or more races in their background. Black? This is what you are? This is what you are? A black? For previous census years, 1980 and 1990, black immigrants and foreign-born black population refers to persons born outside the U.S., Puerto Rico, or other U.S. territories whose sole self-identified race is black. A bunch of people who have no idea who they are. You know why? Because the divide between old and young is huge. You don't think nobody older than you. You don't think nobody who 10 years older than you, 30 years older than you, 60 years older than you know what they talking about. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way. It's always been like that. That's why a lot of us tend to repeat the same mistakes that the people before us made because we don't listen to them. Because when we hit 16, 15, 14, we think we know everything. And now, with everyone walking around with a small computer in their pocket, talking about like 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, now they think they know more than their parents or their people or the older people in their family. Some do, not all. And they don't know shit. Prior to 2000, respondents to Census Bureau surveys and its decennial census could make only one selection in the race question. What you think they chose to identify as? The terms foreign born, migrant, and immigrant are used interchangeably in this report. Not only in this report, but if you had a report in 2025, I'm sure it would be true of the 2025 report. In this report, the terms African immigrants, African born immigrants, and immigrants born in Africa. Wait. African immigrants, African born immigrants, and immigrants born in Africa. African immigrants. Okay. African born immigrants, which is the same thing as African immigrants, it seems. And immigrants born in Africa is the same damn thing, man. This is crazy. Are used to describe any immigrants who was born in Africa, right? Any immigrants who self-identify as black. See, these things are used for immigrants who self-identify as black. African immigrant, African born immigrant, immigrants born in Africa are used to describe any immigrant who self-identify as black. Not necessarily African, and are from any country on the African continent, regardless of sub-region. In this report, Caribbean immigrants, Caribbean-born immigrants, and immigrants born in the Caribbean are any immigrants who self-identify as black and are from any country in this region, which we all know Caribbean people are Americans from the Americas. In this report, the terms Central American immigrants, Central American born immigrants, and immigrants born in Central America are what? They are from the Americas, and they are Americans. And some of them are indigenous to where they are. You don't see those people. You tend to see the anglicized version of those people. The Spaniard version, the Chino version, the Caucasoid version, the Roman, are used to refer to any immigrants who self-identify as black and are from any country in this region. In this report, the terms South American immigrants, South American born immigrants, and immigrants born in South America are used to refer to any immigrants who self-identify as black and are from any country in this region. 1 in 10 black people living in the U.S. are immigrants. Immigrants, particularly those from African nations, are a growing share of the nation's black population. Now, think about it. If we say immigrants, particularly those from African nations, are a growing share of the nation's black population, what does this mean? I thought that every nigger here originated in Africa. So why would we be distinguishing immigrants from African nations and say they're a growing share of the nation's black population? Why would we distinguish them from us, right? Why would the Pew Research Center and many like them distinguish them from us when, of course, we are African Americans, right? We're from Africa, right? We're descended from Africans, right? African slaves who were brought here by the millions, right? Why the need to distinguish them from us? And why is it always a foreigner telling us who we are and who they are? immigrants, particularly those from African nations, are a growing share of the nation's black population. What do you mean a growing share? Every nigga here is African, right? Or a descendant of African, right? Why would you distinguish between the two? Black immigrant population climbs to 4.6 million and is projected to reach 9.5 million by 2060. The black population of the United States is diverse, growing and changing. See what I mean when you call yourself black? What kind of black are you? Well, it's a bunch of blacks all finna be lumped in together. The foreign-born segment of this population has played an important role in this growth over the past 4 decades and is projected to continue doing so in the future years. Well, we know that there's an immigration and naturalization process, right? So there being this new black population, particularly those from African nations, are being admitted into your home. Somebody opened the door. Somebody put a stopper in the door. As a matter of fact, somebody unscrewed the lock on the door. Ain't no lock on the door no more. Between 1980 in 2019, the nation's black population as a whole grew by 20 million, with the black foreign-born population accounting for 19% of this growth. In future years, the black immigrant population will account for roughly a third of the U.S. black population's growth through 2060, according to a new Pew Research Center analysis of U.S. Census Bureau data. The black immigrant population is also projected to outpace the U.S.-born black population in growth. See, when they say the black immigrant population, first, let's go back. Between 1980 and 2019, the nation's black population, we have no idea who they're speaking of. No idea. Because it's clear to me that there are different kinds of black. But there's only one population. You're included in that population. And you are not distinguished. Or are you? Immigrants, particularly those from African nations, are a growing share of the nation's black population. So someone knows that the people from the African nations are different from you. However, on paper, you are the same. The black immigrant population is also projected to outpace the U.S.-born black population. You still don't know who these people are. Just because it says U.S.-born black population means nothing. What about the American population, the American Indian population of the niggas you call black? While both groups, see, check that out. The black immigrant populations is also projected to outpace the U.S.-born black population. The black immigrant population, guess what? The U.S.-born black population could still be immigrants. Their children were just born in the U.S., but their family are immigrants. Their grandparents are immigrants. But their seeds were U.S. born blacks. While both groups, see, they named two groups, and there's a possibility that you aren't included in either one of them. Not good or bad. It's just that maybe you're not being spoken of here. Well, we know you're not being spoken of here, and neither is anyone else, because it says the black. While both groups are increasing in number, the foreign-born population is projected to grow by 90% between 2020 and 2060, while the U.S.-born population is expected to grow 29% over the same time span. How could that be? I told you, ain't no lock on the door. The door wide open. You thought you was just getting some air because it's springtime, because it's the new year. No, the door open for a reason. It's a welcome mat right there still. Migration from Africa has fueled the bulk of the growth of the black foreign-born population from 2000 onward. In 2000, roughly 560,000 African-born black immigrants lived in the U.S. By 2019, that number had more than tripled to over 1.9 million. And many of these immigrants are newer arrivals to America. Newer arrivals to America. Now, remember, we chattel slavery, right? Our ancestors came from Africa, right? So why does it seem to be such a difference in the people who they're speaking of? Why not just say, the Africans, the family members of the millions of Africans that were brought here as slaves, the niggas who are here right now? Why wouldn't it say just, their family members start coming in these numbers and this and that? Why is it such a distinction? And many of these immigrants are newer arrivals to America. 43% of African-born immigrants immigrated to the U.S. from 2010 to 2019, higher than the shares among all U.S. immigrants, 25%, and black immigrants from the Caribbean, 21%, Central America, 18%, and South America, 24% in the same time period. So a lot of people from Africa have invitations. At the same time, a notable share of black Americans today are the offspring of immigrants. At the same time, a notable share of black Americans today are the offspring of immigrants. What about what about the fact that you call yourself black? But they're speaking when they say black Americans today are the offspring of immigrants. You're not the offspring of an immigrant, but think about this. They're referring to these people as what you refer to yourself as, but they're not speaking of you. They're speaking of the black Americans that are the offspring of immigrants. You're not the offspring of an immigrant. They're not speaking of you when saying black American, the same thing you call yourself. Roughly 9% of black people are second generation Americans, meaning they were born in the U.S. but have at least one foreign-born parent, according to a center analysis of the March supplement of the Census Bureau's 2019 Current Population Survey. In total, black immigrants and their U.S.-born children account for 21% of the overall black population. You stop calling yourself black, learn who your people are, learn what your people called themselves, but for now, call yourself what your people called you. If your name Joe, what up, Joe? Call yourself Joe. Because Joe owns something. When it comes to socioeconomic factors, black immigrants stand out from the U.S.-born black population. Think about that. When they say the U.S.-born black population, you probably immediately think that they're speaking of you. No. They're speaking of the children of the black immigrants, the U.S. born black immigrant population and the overall U.S. immigrant population on some measures, such as household income and educational attainment. Now they're saying that they make more money and they more educated than you. Are they though? I think they're comparing the black immigrant foreign parent to the black immigrant U.S. born black descendant of the foreigner. You're not even in this conversation. You're not included in this conversation because you don't exist. I don't think you exist here. If you call yourself black and you are properly an American or an American Indian, you know the people who sprouted up from this soil. You know who you is. We different from everybody else. Can't nobody fake being us. We're not in this conversation because they're not speaking about us. If you're a black, but your people are really from this soil, you don't exist. Because you know who's taking your place? The black immigrant from an African nation and the children of that black immigrant from an African nation, which is called the U.S. born black immigrant. The Caribbean is the largest origin source of black immigrants, but fastest growth is among African immigrants. And you thought the largest portion of Africans came over here on the sardine can slave ship. Apparently, the most African immigrants, the most people from Africa came here recently. The vast majority of black immigrants are from two regions, the Caribbean and Africa. These two areas accounted for 88% of all black foreign-born people in the United States in 2019. And they say that foreign-born shit to throw you off. They could just properly say foreign people. Black immigrants from Africa have been the primary driver for much of the overall recent growth in the black immigrant population. Between 2000 and 2019, the black African immigrant population grew 246% from roughly 600,000 to 2 million. I mean, it's not shocking to me. It's not shocking to me. I've only seen in person and came in contact with a couple of Africans in my entire life. Past the age of 30, I saw a few more at the farmer's market or whatever, but that was past 30. Before that, I've only seen a couple of African people in real life. The Caribbean remains the most common region of birth for black immigrants. Just under half of the foreign-born black population were born in this region. Jamaica and Haiti are the two largest origin countries, accounting for 16% and 15% of black immigrants, respectively. No, disrespectively. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. It says a brief history of black immigration to the US. I think we don't need a brief history. We know all we need to know at this point. The transatlantic slave trade marked the beginning of the black population in the U.S., with the first record of an enslaved African person in the U.S. in 1619. Vastly different from what you've heard. This doesn't say 20 and odd Africans, even though that's a lie. Even though the 20 and odd Africans is a lie. This don't even say that. This say record of an enslaved African person in the U.S. in 1619. The importation of enslaved African people persisted until 1808, when this practice was outlawed. By 1810, there was already a significant U.S. black population. Black, there it is again, in black population, 19% of the overall population, according to the 1810 decennial census. They outlawed these enslaved, these working African people. They outlawed it in 1808. But in 2019, in the year 2000, in 2019, 2000 and whatnot, they're projecting more than ever. African people will be coming to your spot, coming to visit. Think about that. 1619. Let's just read what they say. 1619. It says, with the first record of an enslaved African person in the U.S. 1619. Persisted until 1808, when this practice was outlawed. That's not even 200 years, okay? From 1619 to 1808, you was told there was 10 million, 12 million, 100 million people came here. It was outlawed. No more people brought here from Africa to work. To work. And they also told you that they started, they brought their customs here as well. Rice, beans. They also brought their agricultural technologies here. we're not going to get into that. It's so much that we could go on. The branches are crazy, but we won't. So from 1619 to 1808, it's supposed to have been hundreds of millions, tens of millions Africans come here. And now from the year 2000 up, the most ever Africans are coming from African nations here. And they're known as Black Americans, right? Why is this such a shock? Why is the Pew Research not saying, yeah, the relatives of the people who came here enslaved are just coming over to be with their people? Why is the Pew Research Center not saying that when these African people who were brought here in chains, when it was outlawed in 1808, why wouldn't these people say, you know what, we want to go back home? Because it hadn't been even 200 years yet. By 1810, there was already a significant U.S. black population, 19% of the overall population. You heard that? By 1810, there was already a significant U.S. black population. Do you know what was considered the United States in the year 1810? I suggest you go look. Do you know what was considered the United States in 1810? It said there was already a significant U.S. black population. Who were the blacks? Who? When you accept such a vague term and you ignore its definition, then I suggest that you be prepared to answer when asked the question, who are the blacks in 1810? The 1965 Act marked a departure from the United States' previous long-standing national origins quota system, which restricted the ability of immigrants from outside Western Europe to move to the U.S., to a new system that emphasized family reunification and skilled immigrants. Nigeria and Ethiopia were the top birthplaces for black African immigrants to the U.S. in 2019, with roughly 390,000 and 260,000 immigrants respectively. Kenya has seen the largest increase with 348% growth. And there has been an almost 300% increase in the number of Ethiopian-born immigrants from 2000 to 2019. The Somali-born population in the U.S. has seen a 205% increase in the population of immigrants to the U.S., while the number of black immigrants from Nigeria and Ghana have grown almost 200%. Now, these are people coming from the seat of civilization, right? The motherland, right? These are people coming to the land that their so-called brethren were brought to after being kidnapped and stolen from the places that they are leaving. Why would you go to a place like that? And let's just say that story never existed. Let's say all of that was illusion and fairy tales, Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy. Why the growth in the immigration of these people to our soil. Why? Do you think this is normal for people to leave the soil portion that they sprouted up from to come to an entirely different soil portion? To leave everything they've ever known? Does this seem normal to you? The legal status of black immigrants. Black immigrants more likely than immigrants overall to be naturalized U.S. citizens. The legal status of black immigrants. Black immigrants more likely than immigrants overall to be naturalized U.S. citizens. Why? If agreements were made between the American Indians, your ancestors, and foreigners, if agreements were made and the foreigners didn't hold up their end and they actually broke their own laws and didn't honor the agreements, and they start calling you black so that they wouldn't, in essence, be breaking their laws. So we'll call you something different. We're not honoring the agreement that we made with you because we never made an agreement with a black. And what's a black? Well, it's getting harder to know what a black is because black immigrants more than any other immigrants overall to be naturalized as U.S. citizens. So eventually, and I just told you, you're not even a part of the conversation because you don't exist. The black foreign-born population differs from the nation's overall immigrant population on several measures, including the share that gained U.S. citizenship through naturalization. A majority of the black foreign-born population are naturalized U.S. citizens, which is slightly higher than that of all U.S. immigrants, 60% versus 52%. In fiscal year 2019, roughly 144,000 immigrants from the Caribbean and 92,000 from sub-Saharan Africa. 92,000. Interesting. This is what Henry Louis Gates said that was the number the number of enslaved Africans from the transatlantic slave trade. Henry Louis Gates said that actually 92,000 came to the North American soil. Isn't that interesting? That in fiscal year 2019, roughly 144,000 immigrants from the Caribbean and 92,000 from sub-Saharan Africa were admitted to the United States, to what is termed North America, what is termed the United States of America. 92,000, a number that was said to be the number of chattel slaves that were taken from Africa and brought to the U.S. hundreds of years ago. But we're getting that same number today from 2019, 92,000 from sub-Saharan Africa. Is this not strange to you? It's not strange to me. It make perfect sense. Keep the lie alive. 92,000 from sub-Saharan Africa were admitted to the U.S. Admitted, meaning they wanted to come. But the ways they entered or had their status adjusted varies by region. About 1/4 of sub-Saharan African and Caribbean legal immigrants in fiscal 2019 were admitted as refugees or asylees, compared with 10% of all immigrants. People from the Democratic Republic of the Congo made up the largest group of African-born people who were admitted entry to the U.S. as refugees or asylees that fiscal year, accounting for 24% of sub-Saharan Africa's refugees and asylees in the U.S. There are also substantial differences in admissions through the diversity visa program. While less than 5% of the fiscal 2019 foreign-born population in the U.S. was admitted through the program, this share is 12% among those from sub-Saharan Africa. Ain't that 12%? And you're said to be 13% of the population. While less than 5% of the fiscal 2019 foreign-born population in the U.S. was admitted through the program, this share is 12% among those from sub-Saharan Africa. Who knows? Maybe you don't exist. Maybe the 13%. It says the share is 12% among those from sub-Saharan Africa. Maybe the 13% of the population that is said that you are, maybe that's not you. Why would it be you if you don't exist? That 13%, I'm starting to think it's of the black immigrants. You know, the black immigrants from the African nations, the parents, and then the U.S. born black immigrants. The single largest source country among diversity visa admissions from Africa is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Still, family sponsorship is the most common way for immigrants overall, including those from sub-Saharan Africa. Foreign-born black people are less likely to be in the U.S. without authorization than other U.S. immigrants. Foreign-born black people are less likely to be in the U.S. without authorization than any other U.S. immigrants. Could it be that they get more help? They get more assistance to be here? There were 625,000 black immigrants living in the U.S. without authorization in 2017, accounting for 14% of all black immigrants, according to Pew Research Center estimates. By comparison, 23% of the nation's nearly 45 million immigrants are unauthorized. Over half of black immigrants arrived in U.S. after 2000. Over half of black immigrants arrived in U.S. after 2000. I'm curious, is a slave considered an immigrant? Is a person who was is a person who was brought here during the transatlantic slave trade, would they be considered a black immigrant? Couldn't be, right? It couldn't be, because they say over half of black immigrants arrived in the U.S. after 2000. I guess I was just daydreaming. Almost 6 in 10 black foreign-born people living in the United States, 58%, immigrated to the U.S. in 2000 or later, according to Pew Research Center analysis of the 2019 American Community Survey. Among black immigrants, year of immigration differs by region of birth. Black immigrants born in the Caribbean, Central America, or Mexico, or South America have, on average, come to the U.S. earlier than their African-born counterparts. The people from the Americas came here earlier than their African-born counterparts. It not only says that here, but it says that in Jack D. Forbes' book, where he speaks of Americans being taken back to Europe or Afro-Eurasia. I forgot his book, Africans and Native Americans. Amazing book. Extensive bibliography. Black immigrants born in the Caribbean, Central America, or Mexico, or South America, basically all the Americas, have on average come to the U.S. earlier than their African-born counterparts. Of course they did. In a lot of cases, most of those people are family. And I'm not talking about the foreigners who came and caused all manner of trouble in those places. I'm talking about the people who are indigenous to those soil portions. I know many of them will say, I'm indigenous, my people indigenous, but they can't tell you who their great grandparents are and where they were born. African-born black immigrants stand out. You see how detrimental it is to you to call yourself black? African-born black immigrants stand out for the recentness of their arrival in the U.S. African-born black immigrants stand out for the recentness of their arrival in the U.S. 3/4 arrived in the country in 2000 or later, with over 4 in 10, 43%, having arrived from 2010 to 2019 alone. Fewer than 2 in 10, 16%, arrived between 1990 and 1999, and just 10% arrived in the U.S. prior to 1980. Many black African-born migrants enter the U.S. through the diversity visa program. This program requires recipients to have completed formal courses of elementary and secondary education. I said this once and I'll say it again. Nothing is allowed to happen without the help of the Negro, the American, the Amerindian, the American Indian properly. Nothing happens here without the help of the person who looks just like you and who comes from where you come from. Otherwise, how do you explain the many black African-born migrants enter the U.S. through the diversity visa program? Somebody want them here. I'm not saying I don't want them here. That's not my I don't have anything to do with that. I don't got feelings on it one way or the other. We just talking about what is. But the way they getting here is because somebody bringing them here. Like you remember Barack said, if you're not Native American, somebody brought you here. He forgot to tell you that somebody brought the Native American here as well. The vast majority of black immigrants in 2019 lived in either the Northwest or the South. That year, the South was the region with the highest share of the country's black immigrant population, with 42% living there. The Northeast had the second highest share, 36% of the black immigrant population, while the West and Midwest were each home to roughly 1/10 of this population. With roughly 900,000 black immigrants in 2019, New York is home to the largest black immigrant population in the country and has been since 2000. and has been since 2000. Florida is home to the second largest population with roughly 800,000 in 2019. Texas, New Jersey, Maryland, and Massachusetts round out the top 5 states of residence. Is this normal? Is this normal behavior for people? To leave the soil portion that their people are from, that they potentially sprouted up from, to come to someone else's soil portion and call themselves what those people are? Think about that. Is that normal? You American. Someone comes here. Millions of people come here and they call themselves American. What happens to you? In this report, we analyzed the detailed demographics and geographic distribution of Black people in the United States. I don't think any of this would work if you didn't call yourself Black. The only reason this works is because we agree to the black term. I don't think this would work. Amazing how simple that seems. Ain't that simple? That's simple than a mother. Stop calling yourself Black and this no longer works. Now that's energy. That's energy. But I think the Blacks have gotten so comfortable with calling themselves Black and wear it as a badge of honor. The term Black refers to all people who self-identify as Black or African American on census surveys. Self-identify. It's all based on you. You have all of the power. Analysis of the detailed demographic and geographic distribution of the Black population in 2019 is based on the data from the American Community Survey, the largest household survey in the United States, with a sample of more than 3 million addresses. Do the right thing.